Hi, my name is Phillip. A little background about me. I'm a music industry major, second year here at Cal Poly. I've been in the public school education system my whole life. Today I'm here to talk about funding for education. Basically, my main proposition is the lack of funding for education negatively impacts our state's economy. So today I'm just going to talk about how it affects California's economy and how the three tiers, the CSU, UC system, and the community college system, all affect our state's economy. The first 3 points I'm going to talk about. 1, lack of education funding negatively affects our workforce in California. 2, lack of education funding increases unemployment in California. And 3, lack of education funding hurts a lot of the in-state residents. So the first one, lack of funding affects the workforce. For lack of funding, it causes tuition increases in all the public education systems, and this causes a decrease in college enrollment. Right now in today's workforce, you really need a college degree to be in this high competitive workforce. It's really diverse, especially in California. Sorry, it's kind of nervous.
It's okay. You got this.
Thank you. Also, lack of funding creates a lack of a high quality education system. In 1960, California created a master plan of education, which created the top 3 tier of systems: the CCCC, California Community College System, the CSU, which you are in right now, and the UC. All 3 of them prepare students for today's workforce, but lack of funding hinders them to get a high quality education. Lack of technology in the classroom today, lack of activities, sports, all hinder one's ability to really push themselves to be a better state resident. Lack of skills students can apply for the workforce is really important. Right now, especially here at Cal Poly Pomona, we try to do learning by doing, where we apply work skills for the workforce. Lack of funding kind of like hinders that ability. According to the California State University Impact website, for each $1 invested by the state, the CSU generates $5.43 for the California's economy. The CSU, just the CSU alone, sustains 485,000 jobs and creates a $4.9 billion in tax revenue for state and local governments. So this is just the California State University working together to actually generate more income for the state. And if you cut back on education, this will decrease all that revenue. The CSU actually is California's largest source of educators. More than half of the teachers come from the California State University. According to the Huffington Post, Emmeline Zhao talks about how other states in the nation also are suffering from a lack of education funding, and some of them are actually worse than California, like such as New York, where there's a cut of approximately $3.6 billion just from their public school systems. Second, lack of education funding increases unemployment in California. So if there's less funding for public school systems, that means there's less available jobs at each region. So far there are over 10, there's 10 UCs, 23 CSUs, and each region, they sustain thousands of jobs in each respective region. And lack of funding actually decreases the number of jobs in each region. Currently, the University of California operates world-class healthcare systems in each region. Those basically survive on public funding and private donations. So decrease of public funding will actually decrease world-class healthcare for state residents. Also, lack of funding will decrease attraction for out-of-state and international students. So a lot of funding right now, it's kind of hard to say it, but a lot of funding comes from out-of-state and international students. There's actually a post by the New York Times post where they tell Phil Olive talks about how the acceptance rate for in-state students are actually decreasing, and they accept more out of state just to create tax revenue, which is, I think, is really messed up. Because if we pay taxes for our state, we should be able to attend our school systems. Third, lack of education funding hurts a lot of the in-state residents. There's lack of financial aid and delayed graduation rates for all students, which is really, which hurts us more because we want to be able to provide financially to support a good education. More student migration, meaning there's been talks about how public universities right now are trying to privatize themselves. And if that happens, and if we pay tuition, then it will actually not go towards the state economy, but go towards the private schools, which is bad for all of us. According to the US Census Bureau, right now, a bachelor or master's degree, you really need one to maintain a pretty good income level to raise a family. According to the Census Bureau, once you graduate high school, the median salary for the state of California is $32,003. If you get a bachelor degree, it's $56,670. And if you get a master's degree, the median salary for a family, for the graduate is $64,634. So what I'm saying today is public schools really help the in-state residents, and the lack of funding for all those world-class systems will hurt us more than anything else. Thank you.
All right, Philip, the proposition is clearly identified. You do have kind of a preview of what the structure is going to be. I think that's okay. But in the body of the speech, I didn't really see that preview being developed. In other words, there aren't clear signposts for those secondary claims as you get to them. I do think there is a structure there, but it's not very well indicated to the audience, and it's easy to get lost in some of the minutia, and some of the points really do sound a little repetitive. So if you don't have a clearer structure, people aren't going to be able to focus in on the point that you're trying to make. I think there's a presupposition built into this argument that there are a couple of presuppositions built into the argument that I think need development. One is the notion that there is a lack of funding. I didn't hear any evidence that said that we don't have adequate funding. I didn't hear any evidence that said that funding is threatened or that's cut. When you talked about Cal Poly Pomona, for instance, and here we try and do the hands-on sort of thing. So the first question that popped in my head is, okay, so what is it that we're not able to do because we don't have money? And I don't get any example on that. Instead, I get this generic statistic that says for every dollar that's spent on the CSU, we generate $5.43 for the economy, which is an okay piece of statistical information, but it feels a little vague when it comes to how that works. Because to me, that sounds like, well, if we want the economy to be in great shape, what we should do is cut all of the other programs, put it all into education, and we'll get a 5-to-1 ratio turnover on this. And I'm sure that there's a point at which that doesn't really have that effect. There's another place, for instance, where you talk about cutbacks, and you mentioned that if we have increased fees, that's going to result in lower enrollments. But it doesn't sound, I didn't hear any evidence that said that we're suffering from lower enrollments now. We've had increased fees repeatedly over the last number of years. You tell us, in fact, that this is an essential product. People, Mario, I know you're back there somewhere. People keep buying stuff even though the price goes up. Supposedly, the higher the price, the less demand there's going to be for it. there's some things that people still have to buy, and you make it sound like education is one of those things. It's like food. The price goes up. We don't want to buy, but people have to eat. And the same thing with gas. People got to have gas. Hey, we got to be able to make a living and survive, and the only way to do that is by having education. So, is there any indication that enrollments went down when fees went up? Something like that would be helpful. To me, from one perspective, I could see the argument being the exact opposite. The problem isn't that unemployment goes up when fees go up or when people have lack of access. It's that we get cuts in funding when unemployment goes up, because that's what causes us to have a lack of revenue at the state. So, it's one of those chicken and the egg situations. What is the cause and what is the effect? You have to have a reason to believe that this is in fact the cause that's going on here. I think you do a nice job speaking to the audience, but the evidence is a little underwhelming on some of these points. I don't think there's much doubt that you get, if you spend money, you're going to get some value for that money, but there's not any demonstration that we aren't getting our money's worth currently, or that we would get substantially more if we spent more, and that's where there's got to be some argument. And that's kind of what I think is missing on this particular point. There's one section toward the end where you suggest that we're talking about privatizing public universities. I didn't hear any information to suggest that's true. The likelihood that CSU or the UC system is going to be privatized in some way, shape, or form, I don't know. That sounds pretty iffy. You did have one piece of testimony that I thought maybe suggested that there would be an issue here, and that is that when times get tough, they enroll out-of-state students or international students more readily. I'd need to see a little bit more documentation on that. You had a quote on that, but it may be true. The data that you had sounded vague on that sort of issue. The idea that people might do that because you get higher revenues from out-of-state students, I know that is true, but is that what happened, for instance, when we had the recent crisis, a couple of years ago when we were stuck on money, and they just said, well, California students, you can't come in, go to the community colleges, but all you people coming from Nevada and Arizona, since we're going to charge you a hell of a lot more, come on in. There should be something, even an example, a particular person that you could point to that got welcomed in comparison to a resident who got excluded. All right, thank you.